Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to my course. This is Tech Ed Kirsch, and I'm so excited to talk to you about this new method that I've discovered that I had to make for my own to get hired. I don't know what this fly is doing here. So I can get interviewed and hired in my first real corporate roles. After 8 years of struggling, I used what I learned from business principles to finally overcome having to apply to tons of jobs and not hearing anything back. You know, you've probably been there. You've applied to the 250 jobs. You heard back from one of them. They maybe want to do an interview and they decide to ghost you and go to other candidates. You know, you just want somebody to look at your resume, be able to have a conversation with you. The people who you talk to, you said, oh yeah, we'll put in a good word for you. That didn't quite pan out. You reach out to people on LinkedIn and it's a little cringy. You're not sure if you're being annoying, and maybe 2 out of 20 of them might respond to your message and they may look at your resume. That still may or may not happen. Okay? So there's this big problem. There's this big problem that's going on that has not been addressed in the industry and in university, and that's how to properly do a resume that actually gets results, that actually gets you an interview consistently. Why is it the case where I need to be applying to a bunch of these jobs, right? There are robots attacking me. Well, the ATS, the automatic system that look at my resume and say, oh yeah, we'll just throw it in the trash heap. We call it the black hole, the resume black hole of doom, where nobody sees it. Is anyone seeing it? And like, none of this stuff pans out. And also, there's conflicting information on one website to say, oh yeah, tailor your resume this way, or you got to sell yourself. What does that mean? Or you've got to do this and don't put that, and put your education at the top, or put this. It's all confusing. It seems like nobody has a real answer to your problem to actually solve it. You read a ton of articles, you get your resume redone, touched up, it looks real nice, professional. You go on Fiverr or whatever, Freelancer, they do it up. You spend $150 to still not get that interview, much less get hired. So how do we deal with that? What is the solution? Well, after I had to deal with that reality, I was a graduate student in university for a long time. I'd say from 2010 to 2018. This is really embarrassing to admit. I didn't have any internships. Okay, I wasn't very social like that, so I didn't make the connections that people say, oh, it's your network, you know, you got to connect with people. Well, I didn't do any of that. I was busy getting the skills. I figured if I'm good enough, I'll get interviewed. I'll put my resume out there. I'll go to the career fairs. Nothing. Okay, they look at the resume, they put it on the side. Oh yeah, you know, we'll reach out to you and let you know. But I wasn't in the resume booth the next day when they do the resumes. And I'd be like, man, what is going on? Everything I was trying wasn't working. Now, mind you, I did get 2 or 3 interviews over that 8-year stretch where I was in graduate school, which is pretty bad. But by the time I'd gotten into the interviews, it wasn't quite the right fit, or they were looking for someone who already had the experience, which is ridiculous, right? How am I supposed to get the experience if you expect me to have the experience before I could get the experience? But anyway, we'll talk about the chicken and the egg dilemma and how to fix that later on. It wasn't until I ended up having a conversation with someone, a former student of mine. I was a graduate teaching assistant at a career fair. I said, you know, it's been 3 years. I haven't gone to a career fair in 3 years because I had given up. You know, I was a little depressed. I was lost, and I'd given up hope in the system. These college people and recruiters and everything promising the world this and that as far as the resume, do it that way, do it that way, this will work. No, none of that worked. I said, a career fair, they're a joke. The people who get the interviews, they already know someone in that company or something like that. That's what I was convinced of. And to some extent, you know, it's probably a little bit true. But that's not actually the full story. It wasn't until I did something entrepreneurial, it wasn't until I posted my first course online and understood what copywriting and search engine optimization and those kinds of different things were about, And it wasn't until I did those that I understood how to actually craft the proper resume that was going to give me the results that I knew I deserved. That interview that I knew I was qualified for, that job I was qualified to do. Okay. What ended up happening was that for, shits and giggles, I decided I'd go to the career fair. I know I said, oh, it's not going to pan out to anything. I just printed something off, whatever, it doesn't matter. I met someone who I knew, a former student of mine. And I was telling him what I was doing. I was working in power systems. I was control systems and power systems and power electronics in graduate school. And he said, oh, my hiring manager would be interested in talking to you, because I also mentioned Python and power systems that I was working on. So I talked to the hiring manager, and he and I were talking about power systems. He's the power systems manager at the time too. And I was talking about my thing, and he was like, okay. And I saw his attention was waning a little bit. I was like, man, okay, I thought he said he'd be interested in this thing. And it wasn't until I had to sell my own online course that I realized and knew when there were telltale signs of people being interested in something, what would hook somebody and what would not hook them inside of a course description. So I noticed him, he's like, okay, not necessarily, he's like, okay, looking around, a little distracted. And I mentioned Python. And then his ears perked up. That got his attention. He's like, Python? I said, yeah, Python. I'm using Python to do this and code that and automate this. And his energy changed. His vibration moved around. And he's like, okay, yeah, tell me more about this stuff and whatnot. And then that's what helped me get, at least in the interview, knowing the guy and also noticing that. Okay? When I noticed that and I got into the interview, I used more of the same principles that I learned from having to sell my own online course. Fast forward now, I actually get an offer to do my first internship, 28 years old. 28 years old, PhD student, right? I'm in an internship with 19-year-olds, freaking 20-year-olds, they never even dated someone before, and I'm in their top transmission line design unit with one other person. She was from Tufts University. So we were the cream of the crop as far as the interviewees, the new interns was concerned, right? And I noticed that I was getting, because of my LinkedIn, I applied some principles on my LinkedIn, that I was getting calls. I was getting calls and everything. And then when I showed them my resume, I wasn't getting interviewed. Same problem. I was like, wow, it's really about who you know and selling yourself, right? People say selling yourself, saying the right thing, talking the right game. Okay. So I'm like, man, what's the point of having a resume? I really had to get the job first to actually be appealing to whatever. But that was not the case. The resume, I still wasn't getting more interviews. I'm like, what is going on? It wasn't until I applied the principles I learned from marketing, search engine optimization, and put them onto the resume, it was then I started getting interviews. All right. And so what I'm going to do in this course is show you what I've discovered, how to reverse engineer a resume. And I'm not talking about tailoring a resume. That's a completely different mindset, framework. Okay, I'm going to show you this new framework that nobody knows about, that nobody's talking about, that I wish I had when I was looking for jobs and opportunities and hoping for my resume to get me an interview. All right. Now I have 4 times higher chances of getting interviewed for my resume. Oh, all right, the rest of the story. So check this out. I was joking. I was working at an Encore, and I was joking with some of the engineers at Encore. This is my internship that I was at. I was joking with them because we were doing a lot of work for this organization called ERCOT. If you don't know what ERCOT is, that's one of the independent service operators in the U.S. for managing large power grids, transmission lines, which generators can connect to the power grid. And there are only 5 of them. They're pseudo-government organizations that manage the power in Texas. You have ERCOT, I think Southwest Power Pool Group is one of them. And then you have like 3 others, all right? All of the transmission and power and generation in the United States. ERCOT is for Texas. And we had to do reports that I was generating in Python and doing tests and contingency analysis in Python. And I joked to my manager, I said, it'd be funny is if after this internship I ended up working at ERCOT, right? I was hoping they would give me a job offer for my internship and want me to stay on, because I was desperate. I had a family to take care of at the time, and I needed money, right? I didn't want to leave after the internship. And I said, it'd be funny if I ended up working at ERCOT, wouldn't it? Crazy enough thing happened. In the last week and a half of my internship at Encore, no joke, after, a lot of calls, but no interviews, until after I changed my resume up. I changed my resume up for ERCOT, because I was like, what? ERCOT called me. There was a recruiter. She said, hey, Kirsch, I want to talk to you. I spoiled it. She said, hey, Kirsch, I want to interview you for the end client. I said, who's the end client? They said, ERCOT. I was like, no freaking way. ERCOT is like, the ISOs, if you don't know, they're like pseudo government, right? So I was excited. I'm like, what, ERCOT? She's trying to interview me for ERCOT. Okay. So I said, I gotta work on something in this resume. I said, let me try this thing I was thinking about. I used the techniques from marketing, messaging, and copywriting onto my resume, and I got the hiring manager's attention, and I got the interview. Okay. And then check this out. Because I had experience talking on the phone more, talking to people, selling myself, which I'll talk about later in the course, right, for the interview phase, I did well in that one conversation. And because I had the skills, I remind you I'm a PhD, so I totally have the skills. This is power systems and control systems are my specialty, right? I end up getting an offer from ERCOT. And then for the next year, I ended up working at ERCOT. That was one of, as a power systems engineer, being able to work at an ISO, an independent service operator, that is a dream role to have. That's one of the dream roles you want to have, okay? All because I finally took life by the horns, the bull by the horns, whatever, life by the throat, I don't know what to call it, right? And applied what I learned from business and entrepreneurs who don't want a 9-to-5, right? I took those principles from business and entrepreneurship and applied them to the job hunting process. And certain things switched for me. They made me have certain realizations. The job hunting is a lot like being an entrepreneur, all right? So this resume method that I used, I call it the resume recipe. It's where I reverse engineer everything that's needed in order to create a resume that's going to stand out and shine among other candidates that will at least get you the interview. Okay? This is stuff that you are not taught. I haven't been taught it. I looked online, I do research. Even after getting multiple roles now, I routinely get interviewed for, and reached out to, but also interviewed because my resume actually converts. Okay? And I see resumes all the time from would-be working professionals, aspiring engineers, new graduates, and even working professionals. And they make a lot of the same mistakes. What I'm going to do is show you, I'm going to get you up on game on how to stop making the mistakes that I was making, that everyone else, 99% of people are making. Even working professionals make these same mistakes. And use the system that I use to consistently get myself and others who I've helped at least 20 people get hired, at least get interviewed, and also get hired using these secret techniques from businesses and entrepreneurs. And also, I'm an entrepreneur, so I know exactly deeply how well this works. It's very effective. Okay. So that's the introduction. I wanted to tell you just a bit of my story to let you know that I understand what it is, what it's like applying for those tons of jobs, not hearing anything back. It's about that resume. There are things you can do with the resume that will get you the results you're looking for. That's going to get you the interview. And eventually, at some point, get you hired into the job that you know that you deserve. Okay?